Right. So the recording is in progress. That means we all have to be on our best behavior because it's on tape. So there we go. All right. Anyway, so I did want to welcome you to the class, and I did want to talk about a couple of things just as we get set. We'll go over lots of stuff just to get us going today. That'll be really the goal of the class today. So, a couple of FYIs as we sort of go through this. All right. So just a couple of other FYIs as we kind of go through this. So I am in a different time zone than you, which means that if I refer to it being an hour earlier than you're at, don't be confused. I sometimes forget that I'm in a separate time zone. So it's only a few minutes after 4 for me here, and it's of course 5:08 for you in South Carolina. So just kind of be a little bit aware of that. And whenever I send messages to you about times or listings in the class, you'll note that I put what time zone I'm talking in, and I'll pretty much talk in Eastern time because that's where you guys are. So this way there's no confusion, mostly for me, probably not so much for you, because sometimes I forget, as I said, that I'm in a different time zone. So and like I said, most of you probably read my email. Did anybody not read my email that I sent? Okay, good. So it looks like everybody did read it. You have a little bit of idea of who I am and kind of go from there. So I've been doing this a long time. My philosophies and ways that I teach over the years have evolved in terms of the things that I think are important. So I will ask you about your expectations for class as we kind of go through here. But for me, my goals here are pretty straightforward and simple. So, number one, I'm going to try to give you an overview of what we mean when we use the generic term of human services, which is a fairly generic term. And it has a pretty wide set of definitions. And I'll just try to kind of encapsulate inside of what I am teaching you so that when you leave class, you'll know what the field is and whether this is a good fit for you. I mean, hopefully it's a good fit for everybody, but I have discovered over the years that occasionally a student will be in class and recognize this isn't what I thought it was. And that's fine. If it's not a good fit for you, it's not a good fit for you. And, then you'll need to make a decision on what you want to do going forward. So, that's okay. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to, inquire about pretty much anything related to the class. I'm pretty open ended. I'm also very informal. So I guess that's another thing I want to talk a little bit about. I lived in South Carolina for 11 years, and so I'm pretty familiar with the culture of Charleston and the South. And among the things that I recognize, it's a pretty structured, pretty formal culture. That'd probably be the best way to put it. I am a very informal person. You'll notice I sign my emails with my first name. I know a lot of students are not comfortable calling me by my first name, but honestly, the way I look at this is we are all colleagues and peers in this class. So I value your experience. I value you. I value your spending your time and money entering the profession. And the only things that I have on you for the profession are an education and having done this for more years than some of you have been alive. So I got my first professional job in 1980. So that makes it 45 years ago. So I've amassed a certain amount of experience in that time. But if it's anything that I've learned over the years, and my goodness, there are a lot of them, it's that your experience is as important and as valuable as mine in the teaching process. So that you bring yourself, and I respect the experience that you bring. And I am open to hearing about that experience in any form that you want to share it in. as long as it's within the frame of the class, right? There are always boundaries inside of a classroom. But I'm really pretty informal. And I will kind of engage with you in that way and engage with you as an equal partner. The other thing I want to talk about, or another thing, not the other thing, but another thing, is that, learning is not a spectator sport. And this is a very, very important point for me. If you want to learn, you need to engage in the process. And I'll talk about what that is a little bit. But I'm not going to sit back here in my office in front of my camera and just spew information at you and kind of feel that that's where we leave it, that you need to sort of, in a sense, just hear what I'm saying, take notes on what I'm saying. Feel free to take notes if you want, of course. Um, and that the learning kind of ends there. The more you put into this, the more you're going to get out of it, so that when you're doing your assignments, when you're doing the reading, when you're watching whatever videos are in there, it's really incumbent upon you to engage with the material. Much like you did with the opening discussion, even before kind of class started. So I appreciated that so many of you responded even before day one, which was nice to see. And I think for me, it shows a little bit of your motivation and investment in kind of the learning process. But this is a really important point to me. If you want to get the most out of the class, you have to engage in it. So you have to engage in the assignments more than at a cursory level. You have to engage in discussions more than at a cursory level. And you need to be willing to ask questions, even challenge things that you hear. Feel free to disagree. The only rule I have about conversation in the classroom is that it's civil. Okay, so that we treat each other as equal peers. We are civil. We are polite to one another, and we treat each other in that way. So that's pretty much the only rule. Inside of that, feel free to disagree. Feel free to bring up alternative points. Feel free to critique what you hear, what you read. Really, that's all part of the learning process, and that's kind of really important to me. We will do some things that are outside of the textbook, and I'll talk a little bit about the textbook and make sure hopefully it's working. I know there have been some glitches in the process, but we'll get to that. But I don't teach from the textbook, so I'm not going to sort of throw up a PowerPoint and then repeat back what you've already read or should have read with the assigned reading. If you have questions about anything in there, feel free to bring them to class or send me an email or some note some way that you have a question, something didn't make sense, or whatever, or you want more information on that or an explanation or whatever. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going over what the textbook says. You already know what the textbook says. You can all read. I trust that you'll do the reading and things of that nature. So, when I teach, it comes from a lot of the other things that I've kind of gathered over time that I think are important in the field of human services in what I really refer to as the helping profession. So you'll hear me use that language a lot about helpers and being a helper, those kinds of things. So that's kind of an important thing for me and to me. I'll also try to put lots of other resources in the class that are not from the textbook, but are from other writings, other textbooks, and either other events that go on in the world that I think are relevant to what's in the classroom. What you learn should be dynamic. And although I've taught this course probably more times than I can count, it never really looks the same twice. And that is to some extent by design, and to some extent based on you and what you give me. So a lot of times what I do is I look for what you give me. I look for what you write in your assignments. I look for those kinds of things. And I try to integrate that back into the discussion process when we meet on these, what is it, Tuesdays at 4 o'clock, or Tuesdays at 5 o'clock in your case. So that's kind of how I go about this. So that's kind of a little bit about what's going to happen here. We only have 7 weeks. It goes super fast. And in a lot of ways, there just is not enough time to get as much information in there as I would like to get. But that it is what it is. A couple of other things we'll talk about during class that I'll focus on. One, I'll talk a lot about compassion and what compassion is and why it's so important, and when we see it and when we don't see it. I'll talk about concepts like what it means to be non-judgmental. Some of you mentioned that in your discussion posts, and whether we really can be non-judgmental and what it takes to be non-judgmental and what's that mean. We'll talk about empathy and kindness and sympathy and kind of what they mean, because those are really important precursors. My belief is that in order to be a good helper, you have to be in touch with who you are. Helping comes from you as an individual. So a lot of times it's not about what you know, although there's lots of stuff to know and you should learn that stuff and it has lots of value. But everything emanates from you as the individual. So what that means is that you need to be in touch with who you are. And you need to understand what your motivations are for doing this work, and what even helping means. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between helping and hindering. Oftentimes, in my experience, I have seen people who think they're helping, but they're not. They are actually hindering. And so we'll talk about some of the differences there and what that means. Hopefully, I will challenge some of your beliefs. Hopefully, you'll challenge some of mine. And through that process of questioning and digging, we will learn more. We will try to get beyond the superficial. I don't really like to stay at that level very long. I find it kind of A, boring, and B, not very informative. So I will try to sort of dig deeper. So I'm asking you to contribute. I am asking you to work and review all the materials that are in the classroom and that you see out there, and we can kind of go from there. So before I go any further, any other burning questions or things that you want to know and make sure we get done before today is done? So that would be something, if you wouldn't mind, to put in the chat so that I can hold on to them and see them. Because some of them may be things I'll talk about, and other things I will just add into what I want to talk about today. So I'll give you a minute to kind of write any questions you might have, and we'll go from there. So you have 60 seconds to type away. We'll give you 60 seconds, and then we'll go on from there. Yeah, the access code for the book. We'll definitely will get to the book. And not only is it frustrating you, I would share in your frustrations, because I did everything I was supposed to do, I thought, and we'll see where that goes. So. All right. So the only question seems to be about the code. So did anybody use the code and did it work? Okay. So raise your hand so I kind of know. Okay. So I see Claudia, and nobody else has been in the book. David is shaking his head yes. So I'm going to take that as a yes. Yeah, don't worry too much about the chapter 2 and 3 quizzes about the dates. I may have made some mistakes on those. Everything will be due, just as an FYI, kind of rule of thumb, and on the Sunday following the week of class. So for module number 1, anything that's in there is due. I'm just looking at my calendar here on the 19th of January. And we'll just follow that pattern. I'll have to go back in and look at the dates Sometimes when you're putting those in, I'll be honest, there's a lot of them, a lot of places to put them, and mistakes do get made. So, yeah. If anything comes up like that, there looks like a due date that is kind of weird, just shoot me an email and say, hey, I noticed this date doesn't seem right. And usually it means that you have a flawed individual in some cases teaching the class. That would be me, as well as flawed individuals taking the class, because as humans, we're all flawed. And I will absolutely make the changes in those things. We do drag information from courses over from year to year, and the dates come with them. So sometimes those dates kind of stick in there, is part of what happens. So we'll go from there. Okay. It says we will have Zoom meetings weekly. That is correct. I will usually post the link either in the morning or the day before in the announcement section. So you'll see that link in there, and we will be doing Zoom meetings every week unless something comes up in my schedule and I would let you know in advance that ABC happened and for whatever reason we can't have class that week. But I don't anticipate that to happen, but stuff happens, as we know. So, all right. So there is that. So with the book, the way that it's supposed to work, and I really can't show you that because it doesn't work for me the way that it works, but I'll show you what I can. So I'm going to share my screen, and especially since Claudia, I think you're the one that got into the book, correct? Yeah, okay. At least, I mean, there may be others, but I remembered you. So let me get to the class. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and let's see. Whoops. So shit. All right, so you should be looking at the class, the D2L shell of the class. You're going to be looking at it from the perspective of the instructor, just as an FYI for the moment. So, um, all right, so I'm going to go to the content, and I will go over the whole class too, just so we're all on the same page. All right, so this is the opt-in and textbook link. So I think everybody knows that you should opt in from here. Opt-in instructions are there. I just carry that over. They're pretty standardized. I don't actually write those. And then click on the red shelf and accept or opt in. Now you can opt out, obviously, and then if you opt out, which is fine, you can get the materials on your own. It's your choice. So whatever works for you is fine with me. Next, you should go here. If I click on this, it will just open up to the book, so I'm not going to bother with that. But if you open that up and sign in, you should be able to put the code in there, and then that should give you access to the textbook. You should never have to go back there again. And then when you get to the materials, so chapter 1 reading, it should just work. That's the way it's supposed to work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all of you. Okay. All right. So Claudia, is that pretty much what you did? Okay. And that worked. Okay. All right. So be like Claudia with the textbook. That's my thing now because it worked for her. So if you do it that way, it should work. If it doesn't, you can get in for 2 weeks on a trial subscription. So you can do that as a trial until we get this fixed so you don't get behind. That is an option. But you will have to go back in and put the code in eventually because after 2 weeks, you won't have access anymore. So, but the fact that it's working for Claudia means that for most of you, it should work. Sometimes there is a glitch, even when it works for most of the class. So if you can't get in, it may not be you. There may just be some technology thing that honestly, I don't know what it is. I'd have to figure it out or have to ask for support to get it figured out. But we'll kind of go from there. All right. So hopefully that will be helpful. Looks like somebody purchased the book because they had trouble getting in. That's fine, your choice. It should be no worries. All right, so we're good with that. So there are no other questions with that. Fantastic. All right. All right. So before we kind of go over sort of how the class functions in D2L, because guys, so let me ask this question first. Is this the first TTC class that you guys have taken? So actually in the chat, if you could, this will be helpful for me. If it is the first TTC class that you've ever taken and have no experience with TTC or D2L or any of that, just put a yes in the chat, just a Y actually. If you have experience, you don't need to respond. This gives me an idea of how many of you are new to this. All right, so just 3. So that's helpful for me anyway, or 4. Still helpful. So, all right, so most of you have experience with D2L, which is good. I don't know who your instructors were. I don't know how they organize their D2L shells. So I will share that with you. But before we go there, I would like to learn a little bit about you and give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. So A, I don't have to do all the talking, and B, I do like to know the students as best we can in this modality. I did share with you my stuff. So feel free to, you know, check out anything and any links that I gave you and give you an idea of who I am. So I know a lot of times when people, instructors introduce themselves, they give this whole litany of their professional background. I can give you a whole litany of my professional background, but it's the person that's teaching you. That's kind of the way I look at it. Just like when you're a helper, it's the person that's helping you, right? It's not the textbook material. It's not all those things. It's the person that you see in front of you. So I'd like to give you a sense a little bit about me in that way. And, I think that creates a positive atmosphere in the classroom so that, we are that. I do recognize, of course, that, there is a power structure within a classroom, much as there is in everything in life. And that because I give you your grades and I'm responsible for all of that, that I am in that position. Of course, I would never abuse it. Go from there. But I do recognize that that does exist and that for some of you, especially people who are used to a more formalized hierarchical structure, I find that sometimes that actually can get in the way. So I'm trying to flatten that out. It's kind of the way I think about things. Tiffany would like to go over the book code again. Sure, I'll do a quickie on that. So basically, Tiffany, what you have to do is that you go into the module section. I'm going to pull the class up because if I see it, it's always easier for me. Into the module that says opt-in link and textbook link. Go in there. There are opt-in instructions, but first you go to Red Shelf Digital Learning Materials. You click on the book and you opt in if you choose to opt in, or opt out if you choose to opt out. So you can do either, your choice. If you opt in, then there'll be a code that comes up and you can copy that or write it down or do both, whatever works for you. And then you go to the next link that says 25SP F1 HUS 101 Introduction to Human Services 002, which is the class. You click on that. You have to set up an account with Cengage, which is pretty easy. Just follow the instructions. Or if you already have an account, put in your credentials. And once you do that, there'll be a place to put in the code. Drop that code in there, press whatever buttons it tells you. I don't actually do that. I actually don't see that part of it because I have instructor access automatically. And once you do that, it should allow you access to the textbook. You're good. You can close that out. And then you can go to each module and all the links for the textbook and the quizzes should work. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. You're shaking your head. Did you get that? No? Okay. So, well, what I can do is I'll try to do a video, not today, probably, but to get that back to you so you can actually see it. Okay. Because I think that'll be the best way to do it. You're muted. So if you're talking to me, I cannot hear you. Okay. You screen?
I didn't know if I could talk.
Yeah, you can talk. I just one at a time.
Okay.
Feedback and I hear background noise and la di da, which doesn't work for us. But yes, go ahead.
Okay. Um, I don't know what's going on my end, but it's like every time you're explaining it, the internet is just really bad.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, and you're dragging actually. And I think we just lost you. Yeah. All right. Well, all right. So we'll move on. I'll work with Tiffany when she comes back, or in a separate section, so that we can move on with class when she's got better internet connections. So yeah, Tiffany, we can do this kind of separately. And when you get your internet back to, working better for whatever reason, so it won't be so choppy. But we'll make sure that we get you back in. Okay. All right. All right. Did it ask anyone for a course key? Did it ask anyone for a course key? I'm seeing no from a bunch of folks. So it did ask you for a course key. Okay. Jasmine. All right. I'll have to ask the rep why that happens, because if it's happening only to some people and not to others, it's really hard for me to know what's going on. So again, I apologize for all this textbook stuff. It used to be that we didn't have all this opting in and stuff, but the college changed that for some financial reasons. And so we're still new at this and in terms of the opting in. So there have been some glitches. So my apologies. It was easier for me too when there was no opt in. Trust me on that for sure. So we're all kind of in the same boat here. All right. All right. So just if anybody, everybody can make sure they're muted. So if there's background noise, you don't have that issue. All right. All right. All right. So your turn. So what I want you to do, it's going to be pretty simple, is I have um, three questions that I'm going to ask you. Okay. Pretty simple questions. What I want you to do is write your answers in the chat, but don't hit the send button until I tell you. Yeah. The first three quizzes are due on the 19th. That date is obviously incorrect, David. 19th of January. I'll go back in and correct that later. What I want you to do is answer three questions, and I don't want you, and write it in the chat so that we can kind of see it, and then I'll kind of roll through it as we go. But I don't want you to send it until everybody's had a chance to answer their question. So I'll give you a couple of minutes, and then I'll kind of tell everybody when to send it, and they all come through at once. So the three questions are pretty straightforward. What are your expectations for the class? So, whatever your expectations are, and you can keep these answers relatively short. Um, what fears or anxieties or concerns do you have about just taking classes in general and about your own performance and about anything to do with any of the classes, if you have any? And what, if any, obstacles do you see in front of you that might hinder your ability to complete your schooling? Okay, so don't send them just yet. Okay, so so go ahead and answer those questions. I'll give you a couple of minutes, and then we'll kind of go from there, and that will give me some sense of what it is you're looking for and what your concerns are, and I'll try to bake that in as we teach the class. So give this to you. I am going to actually mute my audio All right. So how we doing? Looks like people are still writing, so I'll give you another couple of minutes. Can I go over the questions? Yeah, sure. I can. So the last two questions are what fears, concerns, anxieties do you have about kind of being back in school, taking the class, kind of what's in your head, if you will, that might be a hindrance for you, if any. I mean, you may have none of those things, and that's perfectly fine. And what kind of obstacles, so practical obstacles, do you see in front of you? Time, other responsibilities, lack of support, concern about your own ability to understand, to use virtual environments, anything like that. Again, part of the reason I ask these questions is it helps me kind of frame the class and how I interact with you and how I support you through the process of the class. I mean, my goal is to try to get everybody to the end of HUS 101. If you choose that this isn't the right profession for you, that's fine. But I really do not like to lose students because they felt overwhelmed or they felt that they weren't getting enough support or things weren't clear enough or whatever. So, part of that is important that we kind of go from there. So, all right. I see people are sending, so go ahead and send whatever it is you've written. As they come in, I'm going to go back up to the top once they're all in there, and I'll go over some of them. I won't necessarily read all of them because we'll be here till well beyond the time that we have allotted for class today. If I do that, because there's, like I said, I think there's actually 15 people who actually attended today. So, all right. Well, thank you for answering. Looks like some of you did a lot of answering. So uh, let me get kind of back to the top here. Okay. Okay. So uh, learn more about the human mind and the complexity of how our behaviors guide our decisions and etc. And so using your journey as a counselor. Okay. So let's see. I want to think about how I want to answer that exactly. So, I mean, we'll touch on some of those things, but in this class, so I'm gonna talk about this class specifically because when we look at the whole program, there's obviously a lot more there. But in this, we're going to really focus on the profession and some of the fundamental um, concepts and precepts that you need to have about the profession and what the profession is, the depth of the profession, the changing nature of the profession in today's world. Um, and really, so when you are done with class, and this may answer some other people's questions too, when you're done with class here, you'll understand what the human service profession is and what it looks like, what it requires of you as an individual, um, what it requires of you in terms of your knowledge base, and hopefully a little bit about yourself, and understanding deeper appreciation, understanding of what it requires of you to be in this profession. That's really kind of the focus. I'm not going to get a whole lot into kind of psychology and kind of what causes behavior, which we could spend a lot of time on. That will come in other classes later down the road, whether you're taking some psych classes or other human service classes. So this is really designed as an introduction. And we're also going to talk a little bit about, and I didn't mention this, I don't believe, We'll talk about compassion. And I'll talk about why I talk about compassion, just so you have an idea of why I think it's so important. Um, but we're also going to talk about the skill of what is called critical thinking and critical reflection. So the best person to critique your work is not me, it's you. And I'm going to work to give you somewhat of an overview of what that looks like so that you can really evaluate your own experience in a meaningful way and learn from experience. So, those are the kinds of things that this class will be. And I know that might not be the exact um, sort of uh, expectations that you had, but that's what we will do for the most part in this class. And there's some other stuff in there, of course. So learn about the profession, which I just addressed. So we certainly will do that. No anxiety or fear, really. Well, that's good. And you're excited. And obstacle is just time management, as is the obstacle for so many of us. I'm going to guess that a lot of you probably think that terms of that, and some of you may have struggled with that more than others in your life. So, what I'm going to say to you about that is that in terms of time management, try not to wait on things, try to give yourself the whole week to do the work, to go through things. Um, Make sure you have time to do the work that you need to do. Try not to do it at the last minute. And make this important. You're spending your time, effort, energy, and money. It's geared towards your future. I am not a time management expert. I don't pretend to be, but I know it is an issue for lots of people. So, all right, to learn as much as possible during class. I appreciate that, which is good. And, again, learning is on you, not just on me. I mean, I will present you with things, I will give you materials, I will answer questions, I will offer you my experience. I will try to explain things in a way that is clear. But, if you don't understand something, you've got to ask. If something doesn't make sense to you, you've got to ask. If you want more information that's kind of extraneous to the class, go and look for it. Go and seek it out. If you want to bring something into class that you heard that you think is related and relevant, let me know. We can get those things in there. So the agenda for class, obviously, I will organize class. I will have materials. I have to assess you and give you a grade. I'll have stuff for that. But you should contribute. Be an active contributor. So that's really an important thing. To learn as much. Fear, anxiety of not performing the way I need in order to pass. So, one of the things that I have come to believe is that we put too much focus on the end result and not enough focus on the process. So, what I mean by that is that we all have a goal we're trying to achieve. You guys all have goals. I've got goals. Everybody's got goals. We're a very goal focused society here in the West. But what I would offer you is the thinking or to rethink this or to come at this from another perspective is rather than worrying about the outcome, worry about the process. How are you going to do this? What are you going to do to ensure that you get what you need from the class, right? And to do those things. I believe that if you engage in a process that works, everything will in some way take care of itself. And I can guarantee you, if you do all the work, if you complete everything, you'll do fine in terms of your grade. I have rarely, and I've been teaching for close to 20 years now. I've rarely had a student who did all the work and was unable to pass. It happens, but my experience is if people do the work, they get the outcome they're looking for. If you don't do the work, you oftentimes don't get the outcome. Really, that's in a lot of ways what it comes down to. So, I would just think about it that way. Think about each day. Don't worry about when you submit an assignment, don't worry about the grade, worry about the assignment, right? Don't work to please me, work to please yourself. So that would be the way I would ask you to look at it. Navigating your way through everything. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we just need to be patient, Tiffany. If you have questions, just ask them. And I've worked with lots of students before who struggled with D2L, and with kind of using these things. And I will work with you. I mean, that's a promise I'll make to you. If you communicate with me, I will communicate with you. You probably noted, and this may be unique, that we've already been in contact and exchanged information and discussion boards even before class started. And I try to be pretty good at responding. Obviously, things happen in my life, and so it can't be instantaneous, but I try to respond at least every day to emails that come in. Weekends, it's a little iffier, but I sometimes respond there. So just communicate with me. We probably won't talk a lot about human emotions in specific terms, but we will talk about the human experience. And we'll talk about the interplay of emotions and thought. I mean, that'll be mixed into kind of our thinking and discussion. David, I would like to learn about human services and exactly what fields it's around. We will absolutely talk about that. That is a very important topic for me, that everybody leaves class knowing what it is they are engaged in and where it can potentially lead to, which can be a lot of different places. So we will definitely do that. Sometimes will be against me, I feel. Not really sure. I think you left the word out, but we'll work to support you through whatever process. Help with noticing when someone needs help pertaining to work. That's an interesting one. Not really sure. We don't really get into kind of the recognition. We will talk about some about concepts around assessment, how to recognize what needs are, what the focus is in terms of helping. We'll talk about those things. I don't really have any fears or anxieties. That's great. At least half a week, a month, my job as court, and sometimes I don't get off until right at 5. Yeah, I will work through that. I mean, I'm not worried about that. So, if you're going to be late, just send me an email or a note and, get here when you can. I mean, that happens. I'm not concerned about it, and I don't want you to be stressed about it. Marlena says she expects to grow her knowledge of being a helper, and hopefully that will be the case. Develop a different sense of the fields. Hopefully that'll also be a case. Yeah, digital platforms. Yeah, that can be a little bit stressful. I will try to make this as easy as possible. And again, if you have questions, please ask. That is the biggest thing. If you are struggling, I am here to help in any way that I can. I don't have all the answers either. Sometimes I have to go and figure stuff out myself, but we'll go from there. Life in general is an obstacle as adults. We all have to work and take care of our families. This is true, and get a degree, right? So what you're saying is you got a lot to do in life. I would agree. Life is filled with all sorts of things. But again, I'm here to support you as well as teach you. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough. If you are struggling in any way, shape, or form around class, getting work done or whatever, let me know. If you need extra time for something, if something comes up, and believe me, over the years, everything that you can rationally think about, I guess, has come up. Everything from people losing their homes to being homeless to having fires in their homes to having horrific medical problems come up in the middle of class, and deaths in their family, and all sorts of things students have come up with. If you share with me what you're comfortable sharing around obstacles and things like that that come up, we can work out a plan. Sometimes the plan, honestly, is maybe because of what's going on in your life, this is not the best time for you. And maybe you should start at a later date. That is sometimes the answer. Sometimes it's about altering some of the due dates for things based on some stuff. Sometimes it's just about being able to have someone to talk to about those things and to just reorganize them. So I'll work with you on all those things. Yep, you'll learn more about human services. That's from Layla. You don't have any worries. Time management, we kind of talked about that. To learn more about the profession, and you will. And okay, I think, figuring out if this is the right route for you. I mean, that's, I think, an important one. Um, and so I certainly hope that by the end of class you'll know that. But and this goes for everyone, not just Claudia who wrote this, but if you have questions and want to have some discussion about that with me in particular, we can work that out and have some time to sort of chat. And I'm certainly open with that. It's your life, your decisions. My job here is to just give you information, support you through the process, maybe help you process some information, and make the best decision for you, because that's the way it ought to be. You're feeling anxious about getting back into school. You haven't taken classes in a few years. That's understandable. You're not alone in the fact that you haven't taken courses in a few years. Trident Tech is filled with non-traditional students, as you can see from the board. So we tend to have a majority of students who are from their 20s on up through we had one student, I think the oldest student we had was 70 or 71 when they graduated. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that. And I want you to know that, again, we're here to support you and to help you make it work. And I certainly understand that sense of anxiety when you start something new and haven't done it for a while. And it's a big responsibility. You recently had a baby. Congratulations. Babies are great. Being a parent is the greatest thing I ever did. I have 3 of them, although some of them are older than you guys. So they're not babies anymore, but they'll always be my babies. And yeah, balancing school and work and caring for a child. That's a day by day kind of thing. So hopefully you have a good support system, because my experience is the better support systems you have out there, the better you are able to manage all your responsibilities. Doesn't mean you don't have a lot of them. It just means it's helpful. And some days will be good and some days might be not so good. And so I think just going into the realistic perspective is the best way to face it. All right, let's see. Get better at understanding human services. Definitely do that. Okay, so Jacquel talks a little bit about presentation. It looks like anxiety of the kind that kicks in when I think of things to say at first. But once you get going, you're fine. All right, well, that's good. Getting going is good. I tend to talk a lot, so I think we can work with that. And I think that's perfectly understandable. Time management. So you're a single mom, you got a 2-year-old. 2-year-olds, you already know this, they are a lot of energy and they'll stay that way, kind of going forward for a while. And I don't know, I had a 15-year-old that had a lot of energy. So when he was 15, so it lasts for a long time. And so you don't want to give up no matter what. What I would say is do what's good for you. Make sure that you can give what you want to each of your roles as a person. Okay. And again, understand that some days will be harder than others, but I appreciate that motivation and I appreciate your sense of kind of, I want to do this and you're motivated. I think that's important. I would say always keep a positive attitude. Hopefully learn how to communicate better in a social environment. All right, Nadia. I mean, hopefully that will happen. We really won't get too much into that, but there are lots of classes in the curriculum that talk about communication. So that really does get addressed over time. Used to help people. Oh, my energy. Sometimes fears I have is that I will not be able to understand the information. Textbook. Yeah, I mean, if you have questions, ask. I cannot emphasize this enough. Um, if something doesn't make sense to you, ask. It's as simple as that. You know, sometimes things don't make sense, and that's okay. And sometimes things are confusing, and that's okay too. So just ask. And I think that's the best way to manage that. Don't be afraid to ask. It doesn't mean that, everybody else understands it. Likely, if you don't understand something, other people in class are struggling with it too. That's been my experience. You've experienced some obstacles, procrastination, uh, motivation, overthinking, doubting yourself, uh, fears of failing. Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that, and thanks for sharing that. And again, when you need support, ask, because those emotions and feelings are not just going to disappear. But I hope that you find the ability to ask for support and assistance when you need it, because that's really the solution to that, in a sense. All right, Jasmine, get a better understanding of the foundations. Yes, we will do that. Biggest practical concern would be working super early in the morning and working a lot and struggling to stay in school. Yeah, I mean, managing your time is important. And I know people have a lot of stuff in there. So, again, and I've said this probably a bunch of times, um, just stay there and ask questions and let people know when you need support, right? You don't have to do this alone. I guess that's the biggest message I want to give. You don't have to do this alone. You're not isolated. You have classmates who you probably don't know, but over time you will know. You have instructors, you have an advisor. Seek support when you need it. Don't wait and think, oh, it'll get better tomorrow, right? Seek it early. If things are starting to unravel for you for whatever reason for school, don't disappear. Seek help. Seek support. Help's the wrong word even. Seek support. So, Janaea, to learn more about human emotion, talk a little bit about that. Ability to perform and pace, one day at a time. Focus on the process. Just focus on what you've got to do and don't worry about the outcome. Focus on the process. I think we get caught up in the outcome. I'm not going to be good enough. It's not going to work. I can't do it. Just focus on the process each day. And that will build confidence when you have successful days. If you have a bad day, it's a bad day. Don't let it hang over to the next. That's kind of some way to think about this. But you got to solve these things for yourself, of course, right? You got to figure this out. And balancing school and work, that's true for a lot of us. Yep. And that's right. I'm glad that yes, I think support is important. We're in the helping professions, right? If I should be able to, in a sense, in a real sense, model for you what helping means, right? So I may be an instructor, which I am, but I see my role in a much more diverse and expansive way. And so I should be modeling for you what it means to be a helper. Now, this is a specific environment with specific outcomes and learning that goes on. So it's certainly not a counseling session, nor is it this, nor do I want it to be. But again, my role is not just that of a teacher. It's one of my roles, but it's not the only role. Not having balance, I've talked a lot about that. Not the best with technology. I think when comes to technology, you got to work through that. We live in a world where technology is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Everything we want to do. I'll tell you a story about technology for me. So over the past weekend, I went and visited my son and daughter-in-law who live in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so I live about 4.5 hours from there, just south of Green Bay, Wisconsin. And we drove there and we were going to the hockey game on Thursday night, the Minnesota Wild. And my son, who we were going to go with, and his wife, he got stuck in Denver because his plane was canceled on a business trip and he couldn't get back. So my wife and I went on my own. He transferred the tickets to me through Ticketmaster. And when I got there, I didn't know how you had to do all these things to get your tickets. So I got to the ticket agent and I didn't have it right. So they sent me to the ticket resolution department, which is basically the you're not really good with ticket technology, so we're going to help you not feel so stupid space. So we went there. People were super nice, and they walked me through this whole process to actually get my tickets. And we got in and went to the hockey game. So the lesson in that for everybody is technology is everywhere and it changes constantly. And it is hard to keep up with. But in this world, we are in some ways doing you a favor, if you will, by doing classes online for lots of reasons. Makes it easier for people to get to it, and work-life balance is easier. We used to do classes in class. I remember I can't tell you how many calls and emails I got. I got to work late. There's too much traffic. I can't get to class. I know the traffic in Charleston is sometimes horrendous. But again, technology is ubiquitous. You got to learn to work through it. So that's just a requirement of the age that we live in. And I appreciate the fact that it scares you. What I would say is don't let it scare you. Just be persistent with it and seek help. And we'll go from there. Okay, congratulations. Thank you. All right. That's fantastic. Okay, questions about the book, please. It chose 2 choices for the book. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I didn't know it showed 2. I'll have to actually look. I don't know the answer to that. I didn't even know that existed. So thanks for letting me know. Okay. All right. So thanks for telling me a little bit about yourselves. We have not a lot of minutes left, and we haven't gotten through my agenda yet. So, um, we may stay a little late if that's okay with everybody. If you have to leave, that's also okay. So we'll sort of see how that goes. All right. I'll try to work out all the textbook issues as best I can. If you get stuck with the textbook and can't complete an assignment, just let me know. I am not going to penalize you for that. I'll tell you that up front. So we'll work through that because I know that can be difficult. All right. So I do want to share my screen and just kind of help you navigate the class a little bit because I think that's important, especially for those of you that have talked about some anxiety around virtual learning and D2L, and some of you are new to it and all these kinds of things. So let me get to that. I will share my screen. Whoops. All right. All right. And we will get to the learning starting next week, but I just want to make sure everybody gets oriented. That's why these 7-week classes go so fast. It is what it is. So we'll do the best we can. All right. All right. So all of you have been in the class, I'm sure. Okay. Good. All right. So the course announcements are here. I use them a lot, maybe more than most instructors. I don't really know, but I use them quite a bit. I will give you feedback. I will give you information. I will maybe offer other resources that come up or other things that are important that we didn't talk about. All of those things, right? So you want to check that on a regular basis. I would say just open up your D2L every day, see if there's anything new there. If there's nothing new, just close it out. That's fine. You'll already see there's a bunch of stuff on here. I will always put the link to class in the announcements. That's where you'll find it. I used to put it in another place, but I discovered that people got confused and this works better, so I've gone to that. Everything you need is in the content section. So you can float around the rest of the course, but everything is in here and there are links to the assignments and things of that nature. So this is mine. This isn't public yet, but I'll kind of show it to you. So, you can kind of get a sense of what this looks like. So I put my own stuff in here. Just ignore that. Opt in. Okay. All right. Instructor resources. That's for me. Video tutorials. That may be something that if there are some video tutorials, I'll pop them in there and make them accessible to you. You can't see that as of yet. Basically, the class runs this way. So online materials, week 1 and 2, talk about the final paper if we have some time today. And then you'll see online materials. You can see these are hidden now, so you can't see them, but everything will kind of be in there. And we'll go right through the course material. We probably won't get to week 8. This is for summer because there is no week 8. I'll try to integrate some of that stuff into the class. And we'll kind of go from there. In terms of what it looks like in here, most of you have probably opened this already. There'll always be some information that is kind of the orientation to the learning module, the material that you've got. You'll see the due date is up here for the material. Even if there are other due dates here, this is the due date for anything in this module, if you will. I like to do videos because I like to talk to people, so you'll see them. So I don't know if anybody watched this as of yet, but watch it if you haven't. And then you go from there, and then things should be done in order. So what I would say is that just go through these from beginning to end. The quizzes are always open book quizzes. So in order to be able to get the grade that you want on the quiz, you have to read or review the chapter. So it's kind of my way of making sure you do the reading. I'll be pretty open about that. I'm not a big believer in quizzes. I'm not sure what it demonstrates other than you can remember facts, which are important, but of all the things you'll learn, I think sometimes facts are the least important thing. The most important thing is how to evaluate information, how to evaluate your own performance, how to seek information out, how to learn on your own, how to critically evaluate your own work, how to understand who you are, and then we'll go get the facts. And we lay the facts on top of all of that. I think we overestimate what facts tell us without context. In a lot of ways, facts tell us very little. So, but knowledge is important, and I will give it to you. And I think that having a base and a context to understand facts is really the way to do it. So I'll try to focus on that as we go through things. There'll be other materials in there. So these are ethical standards. This is another video. This is your assignment. There'll be at least one, what I call reflection in each module. There may be discussion boards or not. We'll have some of them. We already had one. I may add some others as we go through. Pretty much all the assignments are done off of worksheets. So click on the worksheet, complete it, submit it, and that's what I need. And so pretty much they all look that way. This is the way they'll all look. I'll show you some of the others, although they still are works in process. But so you'll see again, there's reading, there's videos, there's more reading, more videos, reflection journal number 2. This is really for me. And yeah, some of this will be, I used to do video reflections. I'm going to take that out because of the nature of the class, but I haven't taken them out of here. But it looks that way. And so that's what you do. So everything you need is in the content section. Obviously, you'll want to look at your own grades and all that stuff. So that's there for you. And there usually are links to the discussion, like I had in the announcement. So that might be another place that links you somewhere. And the discussion was great. Got so many responses. I loved it. That was fantastic. I tried to give generic feedback. So when you submit an assignment, I will try to give you individual feedback. And I will oftentimes give class the whole feedback because there are themes that run through things. So that's kind of the way that I like to do it, and so that you have the information. So I believe that a lot of the learning and the teaching comes through your work and then my evaluation and review of your work. Now, when I'm grading, there are a couple of things that I look for. The worksheet and the reflection worksheets, there are kind of right and wrong answers, but a lot of it is based on your understanding of the material and your perspective. So there isn't one right answer for a lot of these things. What I'm assessing in many ways is your thinking process, your depth of your response, and the effort that you put into it. And gotten pretty good at telling how much effort you've put in. So I rate effort and thinking process pretty highly. I'll use this word, not the best word, but laziness, because it's not always laziness. Sometimes it's people being rushed. So I take that back. Not laziness. That's on me. That's a bad way to frame it, and I don't want to frame it that way. But when you're not putting the necessary effort into the work. When I talk about learning is on you, the worksheets are an opportunity for you to learn, right? They're not just assignments that you have to get done. They are for you to use the information and to process it in a way that it makes more sense to you. So that is an important kind of factor in all of this. So spend the time on this. That becomes important. So that's kind of how the class is organized. I use reading materials not just from the text, but from other places, because I don't really like giving you just reading from one spot. But none of that other reading material is going to cost you any money. I get it from the library. I get it from online materials, things of that nature. So that's kind of how I manage all of that stuff and kind of go from there. So we kind of go from there. So that's kind of the class. There really are no quizzes in here because all the quizzes I use are from the text. If that were to change and I toss something in there, I would let you know in advance. So no surprises. I'm not a surprise person. There'll be no pop quizzes, none of that kind of stuff. I'm pretty transparent, so we kind of go from there. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing. All right. Any questions about any of that? I know I'm going kind of fast. We only have 90 minutes. And so I don't see any questions. Okay. All right. So let me talk a little bit about compassion and why I talk a lot about that. And you'll hear me talk a lot about that. And there's a book I found in the library called Choose Compassion. I'm going to pull some stuff out of that. And if you take me in another course, or if we are together in a course in the future, I'll talk more about compassion. So, we all evolve in life. Life is a dynamic process. We are built on who we were in the past, but we're not the same person. Or we're not, in a sense, condemned to be the same person we were in the past. We're all have the ability to grow. We all have the ability to reevaluate. We all possess those things, whether we use that or not, separate issue. Not everybody does. I urge you to use those abilities. They're in you. Don't be afraid of them. You're not stuck being in some place that you can't get out of ever. Not very easy. And so that's very true for me also. So Um, I'm 69 years old. I've been through a lot of things in my 69 years. And I've come to the point in life where I have really started to look at things in a way that focus on really the value of doing good. I and we all live in a world that, for me anyway, seems to be filled with anger and toxicity and putting people down and this kind of toxic strength of might makes right. You see a lot of that in the world, right? It's out there. Probably always been out there. But I've abandoned it as much as possible, and I work at abandoning it. And I work at abandoning it because I think that it is destructive and counterproductive. It moves us away from our universal, the things that I call universals, the things that we share, and defines us by our differences. And I would make the argument that we share way more than there are differences in us because we're all human beings and life is difficult. I think that was mentioned in here a couple of times, and it's true. Um, Life is difficult. I've done a lot of study of Eastern religions, specifically Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist, if you will. I wouldn't say I'm a religious, but I'm not a religious individual in the traditional sense. I was raised, and I am Jewish. I was raised in that tradition, so it is deeply embedded in me. But what I've come to look at is about doing good, and I think the basis for doing good focuses on compassion. Compassion being different than kindness, empathy, and those are good things to have, and we'll talk about those. And if you read the chapter that I put out there from that book out of the library, he talks about that, which I think is important. So if you haven't read that, it's about 10 pages long. I would urge you to take the time to read it. This is one of those cases where the learning's on you. I'll talk about compassion, but the chapter gets into them in a more depth way. But what the author talks a lot about is that compassion as an action, not as a feeling, right? Some people in the discussion kind of talked about it as a feeling, which it is, but I see it as an action. Compassion is something that we do, and we do it to alleviate suffering. And so let me define that word, because that's another word that we all have different definitions of. And when we talk about suffering, I'm talking about it really from the Buddhist perspective. And they use the word in Sanskrit, which is dukkha, Dukkha, which I'm probably butchering in the pronunciation because I do not speak Sanskrit. But what they really talk about, the way to think about suffering from that perspective and the way I think about it, is really about the, how do I want to frame this? It's really about the struggles that we go through in life, right? The things that are obstacles or barriers or things we struggle with, whether it be our own anxiety as a form of suffering, our fear of failure as a form of suffering, um, even sometimes having to go out when the temperature is 3 below 0, which it was this morning here when I had to go out, definitely was a form of suffering on my poor ears and fingers. But so we're talking really about life. All of us suffer because life is a challenge. And we then, when we engage in compassionate acts, we are acting in a way that alleviates or reduces that suffering for somebody else. Now, how we do that is a gigantic question that I'm not going to address now because we don't have time to address that, but we will talk about that, ways that we do that. So that is really what it is. So small things and big things in some ways are equal in this system. And acting in compassionately becomes a habit. It becomes a way of living, a way of thinking about things. And my belief is that if we want to be helpers, which is what human service professionals are, regardless of what you do, whether you're a therapist or you're working as a psychiatric aide on an acute inpatient ward, or you're a residential staff person at a domestic abuse shelter, or you're working as a case manager, working with people who are elderly, right? We do good. We are compassionate. My belief is that when we put good back into the world, good comes out of it. When we help, we are doing good acts. When we do good acts, we are making the world a better place. We are repairing the world, in the words of the Hebrew sages that use the phrase in Hebrew, tikkun olam, which basically means repairing the world. It is a philosophy from my own kind of faith tradition or cultural tradition or whatever tradition. If you notice, which you may or may not have as of yet, but in module number 1 or in online materials number 1, the picture in there that you see when you open up is about the Golden Rule. And we're all familiar with the Golden Rule. And from most of you probably come from a Western Christian tradition. And in that tradition, do unto others as you would have them do unto you is the way it is thought about. But that's not a Christian morality piece, right? That is a universal. That chart that I had in there, and the reason I put it up, is to demonstrate universal. That all the major faith traditions in the world, Eastern and Western, ascribe to that. That we should, in some way, shape, or form, engage in ways that we would want to be treated, or don't treat people in ways that they wouldn't want us to be treated. Compassion is about doing good. Doing good is what we would want for ourselves. This is a universal. So what I look for, what we want to look for, and why compassion is so important, is it's a universal human value. We don't have to worry about diversity in a sense with it because it's a universal value, regardless of your cultural tradition, your background, your socioeconomic status, your race, your religion, your gender identity, any one of those things. Compassion is a universal value. It's something that we all hold. People talk about it. We don't always act in that way, and that's okay. It's a work in process. We are all flawed. I believe that. These faith traditions, whether they be Eastern or Western, all have their versions of quote unquote nirvana, self-actualization. These are the places where we're in such a good place that we're not flawed anymore. A few of us ever get there. It's always a work in process. So for me, compassion is at the bottom. Engaging in actions that alleviate suffering. It's also the core of ethics. One of the issues I have with how sometimes we teach ethics or talk about ethics is we leave out the fundamental aspect of it and we talk about it as some sort of prescriptor. So we should do this, or it is unethical to do that, or whatever, right? There's a list of things. And when you look at the ethics that are listed in the class, you'll see that. And that needs to be there. We need to, in a sense, define what we mean, but it has to be built off of some universal value. And what I'm telling you here is that for me, and you can disagree with this or see it differently, but I would ask you to at least explore it and consider it, is that universal value is compassion. And compassion is an action. It's not a feeling. Empathy is a feeling. Empathy is a sense of being in tune with somebody else, right? And we act on that in a way. We behave in a way that is empathetic, but it's different. Compassion is an action that alleviates suffering. Suffering, how I've defined it, if you will, is the way I'd like for us to think about it. You can substitute another word for struggle. I think in Hamlet, Shakespeare says, to be or not to be, to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? So what he's saying is if we choose to stay alive and we choose to live, we got to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, difficulty, procrastination, time management, balancing home and work, relationships, sometimes poverty, mental illness, stress, anxiety. Those are slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. If you study philosophy and history and literature, you'll see it everywhere. It's a consistent human theme and a human value. So for me, compassion is where we start, and we will talk about that. And in some ways, when you're engaged in an activity, think about them acting in a compassionate manner. And little things. I mean, really, really little things. So there's a story that you can think of when you are at a restaurant and a server is serving you, and perhaps they're not doing such a great job, right? They're a little slow, they're forget stuff, they're maybe even a little rude. What should be your response? Should we act huffy and like give them a crappy tip or no tip or yell at them or complain? And you could do that, or we could choose to act in a compassionate manner because for whatever reason they're struggling. And so by acting in a compassionate manner, we're doing what we can to alleviate that suffering and not make it worse. And you have to make a choice. What are your ethics? Your ethics are shown through those actions. That, to me, is the basis for ethical behavior. And I think that, acting in a compassionate manner is a basis, and it's the basis for helping. And so that's one thing. Now, there are lots of other things. It is not the only thing that you do, and it's not the only way to think about it. And it's not even as simple, nearly as simple as I am kind of talking about it. So, again, we'll talk about this some more. Yeah, so Jean-Paul had to leave. That's fine. Appreciate that you let me know. Any questions about that? Okay. All right. So if you can stay a little longer, I'd appreciate it. And I apologize for running over. It's just, there's a lot that I like to get to in the first week. All right. So let me check my notes of what I said I would talk about to you guys. All right. Okay. Not too much more. So let me talk about the final assignment, which is the writing of a paper. And I'll get this all up there so the instructions will be there. I'm changing it, which is why I didn't open that up, because I think it needs some updating, and so I'm updating it. So there you go. Anyway, so I've got 8 topics for our final paper. So what I'll do is I will pretty much randomly assign you a topic. If you really hate the topic, you can negotiate with me, but you might not like any of the other topics either. So I'm not sure what that will mean. But the topics really are about understanding a little bit about the history of services, of human services. So what I've done is I've come up with, like I said, 8 topics, and I'll just quickly read through them. You don't have to write all these down. I will get them to you. So, I mean, you can write them down, but I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. So it's the history of services to folks with developmental disabilities, cognitive impairment. That's one category. It's one topic. Another one is the history of mental health services. It's the second topic. Third topic is the history of hospice and end-of-life services. Fourth topic is the history of human service education. The fifth topic is the history of substance abuse services, alcohol and drugs. The sixth topic is the history of attitudes and legislation related to domestic abuse services. The seventh topic is a review of the Great Society legislation of the 60s by Lyndon Baines Johnson and its impact on human services, and it had a tremendous impact on services over the course of the last 60, 75 years. And the history of child welfare services in the United States. So those are the topics. So you'll be writing your final paper on one of those topics. And again, I will outline for you the requirements of that and break that out in more detail for you. But I want you to know that that will get out there this week. So it'll be ready before next week's class, and it will be due 1 week before class ends. So you have about a month or 5 weeks to actually do the paper. So again, don't wait for the last minute. get started as soon as you can. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is the TTC library. So the TTC library is a wealth of information. Has anybody used the online TTC library in class? Just raise your hand if the answer is yes. You have. Fantastic. And if the answer is no, now raise your hand. Okay. Very good. Okay. So, right, not a requirement before you enter class, but I'm going to try and kind of give you a quick overview. I'll try to do a video on this because just think of this as kind of, okay, here's the quick overview, but a video will be coming that's a tutorial that kind of explains this because just again, already at 34 minutes past the hour, so I'm already over time. So I'm conscious of that. And I'd like to get you out on time, but I appreciate your kind of hanging in there with me. Much appreciated. So anyway, let me share my screen and I'll just try to go as quickly as I can. I use the library a lot. So let me actually have to okay. Is it? Unshare. All right, there we go. All right, so this is the library page. So if you go to the website, just go to the TTC website. You'll see there's a link to the library. You click on that, and you get to the library. You scroll down a little. You see it says library, and what you'll notice is it has all of these things here. So we don't have any research guides that I've created, so I'm not going to take you there. I don't really ever go to the latest library news, so I don't know. I use databases A to Z. So if you click on that, what comes up is basically this, and you'll see there are like a million, actually, I think 47 databases or whatever number there are. You don't necessarily want to use all of them. So there's a couple of key things to think about. Academic Search Premier is a really good one for all sorts of articles, journal articles, sometimes newspaper articles, media articles, whatever. And then there are these databases around book collections, which I use a lot because I find that really super useful. So if you want to search something, let's say you want to look at mental health services, just going to do that. And so you could click on Academic Search Premier. That's the database that we'll be searching. It will come up. And you can see that we've got that there. You can actually search more than one database at a time, but you put in whatever your search parameters are. So we'll just put mental health. And a ton of stuff is going to come up, right? So, and again, it's just searching for the phrase mental health. That's what it's looking for. So all this stuff has come up. This obviously is not a nearly specific enough search criteria. You're not going to get a whole lot out of here. And you've got some options here. So you can look at filters, and filters can allow you to search in different ways. It also can have you add databases. It tells you which database you have here, and your subject and publisher. And so you can choose different things and kind of look at it that way. So you can kind of play around with this a little bit. But this is where you can get lots of information. So when you're doing your research papers or when you want to learn about something, this is a good place to go. Again, so that's academic. So if you click on the actual database, it will allow you to add databases. So I use the ebook collection a lot because there's a lot of good stuff in there. There's a couple of ebook ones. I usually use that one or sometimes both of those. I'm going to deselect the academic search one. So if I select those, I'm in a different database. I'm going to get different results. Okay, if it goes back to where I need it to go, that would be really super. There we go. So if I put in mental health now and research, I'm probably going to get different results. So here you go, mental health services, assessments, and perspective. All right, so this is, you have access to this. It's an ebook, and you can access the book now if you want. Just use this as an example. And it will come up, tells you what chapters are here. So you can look, see if there are any information in chapters and good stuff in here. And then you have access to all of these books and materials through the um, through the library. So feel free, and I would urge you to use that. You can search for information through the internet, but this is going to give you a just a better quality overall of materials. Doesn't mean you can't find good stuff online, but it will give you that. So um, there is that there. Now, if you open something up, you can, I should open it up again for you. If you go here, you can save it. That would save it. And then you could see, and if you open up your dashboard for saved things, it will be in there. I got a bunch of stuff saved in there, but you can see it's there. So you don't have to go back and find it each time. So you can see this is the where the compassion chapter came out of. And then I've got all sorts of stuff because I'm in here, I would say, pretty frequently. They recently changed the interface, so I had to relearn it. Anyway, so that's your saved kinds of stuff. You go back to your search, go back to our search, all this stuff kind of comes up. So there are all sorts of books. So um, again, you can see, and you can put in whatever search criteria that you want. Uh, see, positive mental health, public mental health, pediatric mental health, so on and so forth. So we kind of go from there. Um, and again, so you can save it. You save it as I showed you. And that's a quick overview of using the library. So I'd urge you when you get your topic, go to the library, see what you can find. Chapters out of books are good. Information like that is good. Articles are good. And play with that some and get used to using it. It'd be really super helpful. So we've got that. I'm going to end the stop to share. All right. So you see you're still with us, or most of you are, which I appreciate. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else of great import that I didn't talk about. Services. Okay. All right. Any questions or final thoughts as we kind of go through all this? Any final comments? You probably all want to get going so you can get home or eat dinner or whatever. All right. All right. So that's everything. I'll try to figure out the textbook stuff as best I can. Um, go from there. I'll get the final paper stuff done. I'll try to take a look at the dates. Just know that due dates are always the Sunday night. So if you ever see a wacky date, just check your calendar. The following Sunday night is when everything is due. So I try to keep it simple like that. I don't stagger due dates. If you're going to be late for whatever reason on an assignment, let me know in advance, see what we can work out. I'm here. So my goal is to be compassionate. So I want to reduce your suffering, if you will. And so that one of the ways we do that is through communication, because I don't always know when you're struggling for obvious reasons. But if you work with me, I will work with you. That's my promise. That I can promise. And it was nice to meet all of you. And thank you for coming to class. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday, the 20th of January. So have a great week, and I'll see you then. Take care. Okay, so that's for you, Tiffany. Yeah, we can set something up. Um, I will likely have some time on Friday, tomorrow and Thursday are just super busy days for me. So, if you want to do something on Friday morning, that would work for me. Can you do something on Friday morning? You can unmute. There's only a few of us here.
Sorry. Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So I will, I'm going to